Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Starlight, watching the stars through the big windows. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but he still loved the view. The stars looked peaceful out here, far from Earth and the other human worlds. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings," said Dr. Lisa Chong from her station. She was the ship's scientist, always looking for new life forms and interesting planets. "There are big ships coming toward human space, really big ships." Jake walked over to look at her screen. The readings showed massive objects moving through space, much larger than any human ship he had ever seen. "How big are we talking about?" "Each one is at least 10 times bigger than our largest cargo ships," Lisa said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the excitement in it. "And there are dozens of them." Commander Alex Brown looked up from his own station. Alex had been in the military his whole career, but he had never fought in a real war. Nobody had. For 3,000 years, humans had lived in peace with everyone they met in space. "Should we send a message to Earth?" "Yes, but let's try to." "Talk to them first," Jake said. "Maybe they're just explorers like us." The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark, worked at his controls. "I'm sending a standard greeting message on all frequencies." They waited. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Everyone was curious about these new aliens. In 3,000 years, humans had met many different species, and all of them had been friendly. After an hour, the alien ships responded. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that made everyone step back. The alien was tall and covered in dark scales. Its eyes were yellow and cold. When it spoke, its voice was deep and harsh. "I am Admiral Thrax of the Vex Dominion," the alien said. "We have come to your pathetic little corner of space to deliver a message." Jake stepped forward. "Welcome, Admiral. I'm Captain Morrison. We're always happy to meet new friends." The alien's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Friends? You misunderstand, human. We are not here to make friends. We are here to conquer." The bridge crew exchanged glances. This was new. In all their history, no alien species had ever talked about conquest. "We have destroyed 47 civilizations," Admiral Thrax continued. "We have enslaved billions of creatures across dozens of worlds. Now we come for you." Dr. Lisa Chong leaned forward, studying the alien with scientific interest. "Fascinating. A warrior culture that has survived to reach spacefaring capability." Admiral Thrax seemed confused by her calm response. "You will surrender your worlds to us, or we will burn them. You have 7 of your days to decide." Jake looked around at his crew. None of them seemed scared. Alex was frowning, like he was trying to remember something. Ben was taking notes. Lisa was still studying the alien with curiosity. "That's an interesting offer," Jake said finally. "We'll need to discuss it with our people back home." "Discuss?" The alien's voice rose. "There is nothing to discuss. Surrender or die. These are your only choices." "We understand," Jake said politely. "But we're not used to making big decisions quickly. We'll get back to you soon." The alien stared at him for a long moment. "You do not seem afraid. Should we be?" Jake asked. Admiral Thrax made a sound that might have been laughter. "Yes, human. You should be very afraid. In 7 days, if you do not surrender, we will show you what fear means." The screen went dark. The bridge was quiet for a moment. "Well," Alex said finally, "that was different. Very different," Lisa agreed. "I don't think we've ever met a species like that before." Jake sat down in his captain's chair. "Ben, send a message to Earth. Tell them we need to talk to the Defense Council." "And the historians?" "The historians?" Ben asked. "Yes. I think we might need to remember some things we've forgotten." As the starlight turned toward Earth, Jake felt something strange. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something he couldn't quite name. It felt like waking up from a long sleep. On Earth, the message from the starlight reached the Defense Council within hours. The council members read it twice, then called an emergency meeting. For the first time in 3,000 years, humanity faced a real threat. Ambassador Katie Wells was chosen to lead the first contact team. She had met with dozens of alien species before, always with good results. But as she prepared for this meeting, she felt the same strange feeling that Jake had experienced. "We should probably dust off some old books," she said to her assistant. "Really old books." In the museums and libraries of Earth, historians began pulling out records that hadn't been studied in centuries. Books about war. Books about fighting. Books about what humans used to be like before they learned to live in peace. Dr. Henry Adams, the oldest military historian on Earth, was called out of retirement. He was 90 years old and had spent his whole life studying wars that happened long before he was born. Now, for the first time, his knowledge might be needed for something real. How long since humans fought a real war? A young council member asked him. 3,047 years, Dr. Adams said without hesitation. The last battle was fought over mining rights in the Alpha Centauri system. It lasted 6 hours. And before that? Before that, we fought on Earth for millions of years. We fought everything. Other humans, animals, the environment itself. We were very good at it. The council member looked worried. But we've forgotten how to fight, haven't we? Dr. Adams smiled, and for a moment he looked much younger. Son, you don't forget how to be human. You just forget that you remember. Across human space, the news spread quickly. The Vex Dominion had given humanity 7 days to surrender. Most people were curious rather than afraid. They had never seen a real war, but they had heard the stories. Children asked their grandparents about the old days. Adults went to museums to look at weapons they had only seen in history books. And everywhere, people began to smile. It was a strange smile. Not happy, exactly. More like the smile of someone who had just been given an interesting puzzle to solve. 7 days were counting down, and humanity was waking up. Dr. Henry Adams stood in front of the Human Defense Council, his old hand steady as he held up a thick book. The book was so old that its pages were yellow, but the words inside were clear. "This is the art of war," he said to the room full of worried politicians. Written by a human named Sun Tzu over 5,000 years ago. We stopped reading it because we thought we didn't need it anymore. Council leader Margaret Foster leaned forward. "What does it say?" "It says that the best way to win a war is to win without fighting. But if you must fight, you should know your enemy and know yourself." Henry opened the book to a marked page. "The Vex think they know us. They think we're weak because we've been peaceful. They're wrong." General Susan Muir, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "My family has kept the old traditions alive. We still have the battle plans, the weapon designs, the tactical manuals. We kept them in case we ever needed them again." "And now we do," Margaret said. "How quickly can we prepare?" Susan smiled. It was the same strange smile that people all over human space were wearing. "We've been preparing for 3,000 years. We just didn't know it." Across the galaxy, engineer Tony Garcia was working in his shipyard above Mars. The Vex ultimatum had reached him that morning, and he had immediately called his team together. They were looking at the blueprints for a civilian cargo ship. "See? This support beam here?" Tony pointed to a line on the blueprint. "It's 3 times stronger than it needs to be for cargo. Always has been." His assistant, Maria Santos, studied the design. "Why would we build it so strong?" Because humans always build things to last. And sometimes, lasting means being able to fight. Tony pulled up another blueprint. Look at this. Mining laser. It's designed to cut through asteroids. But what else could it cut through? Maria's eyes widened. Enemy ships. Exactly. And this cargo bay? It's the perfect size for missile launchers. This communication array? It can jam enemy signals. This civilian ship is already a warship. It just doesn't know it yet. All across human space, the same conversation was happening. Ships that had been built for peace were being looked at with new eyes. Mining equipment became weapons. Communication systems became warfare networks. Transport vessels became battle cruisers. The process was surprisingly fast. It was as if the humans had been unconsciously preparing for this moment for thousands of years. Dr. Amy Foster, the best psychologist on Earth, was studying something very interesting. She had been watching how humans reacted to the Vex threat, and what she saw surprised her. They're not scared, she told her research team. They should be terrified. An alien species just threatened to destroy all of humanity. But instead of fear, I'm seeing excitement. Her assistant, Dr. Robert Kim, looked at the data. The stress hormone levels are actually going down, not up. It's like the threat is making them calmer. Because it's giving them purpose, Amy said. For 3,000 years, humans have been exploring, creating, learning. But we haven't been tested. We haven't faced a real challenge. This threat is waking up something that's been sleeping. She pulled up a brain scan on her screen. Look at this. This is a human brain when they're doing normal activities. And this is the same brain after hearing about the Vex threat. See the difference? The second scan showed much more activity in areas of the brain that controlled problem solving, pattern recognition, and strategic thinking. It's like a switch has been turned on, Robert said. Exactly. The human brain is designed for conflict. Not because we're violent, but because conflict makes us smarter, faster, better at everything we do. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was still in space, watching the Vex fleet through his ship's sensors. They had been joined by other human ships, forming a small defense force. But Jake wasn't thinking about defense anymore. Lisa, what do you know about pack hunting? He asked the ship's scientist. Dr. Lisa Chong looked up from her studies of the Vex ships. Pack hunting? It's when predators work together to take down prey that's bigger than any one of them could handle alone. Wolves do it. Lions do it. Humans used to do it. Used to? Well, we still do it. We just call it different things now. Teamwork, cooperation, military tactics. Lisa paused. Why do you ask? Jake pointed at the Vex fleet on the screen. Because I think we're looking at this wrong. The Vex see us as prey. But what if we're not the prey? Commander Alex Brown had been listening. What do you mean? The Vex have conquered 47 civilizations. They're used to being the predators. But they've never met a species that's been the top predator on their own world for millions of years. The bridge crew was quiet for a moment, thinking about this. Humans didn't become peaceful because we were weak, Jake continued. We became peaceful because we were so good at fighting that we had to learn to control ourselves. We were too dangerous to keep fighting. Lieutenant Ben Clark was working at his station when he looked up with wide eyes. Captain, I'm reading the history of human warfare. Did you know that humans are the only species that's ever completely eliminated warfare on their home planet? Not because they couldn't fight, but because they were too good at it. Back on Earth, the recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Millions of humans were volunteering for military service. The surprising thing was that they weren't volunteering out of fear or duty. They were volunteering because they were curious. I want to know what I'm capable of, said Linda Peterson, a teacher who had never held a weapon in her life. My grandfather used to tell stories about the old days. I want to see if those stories are true." The military officials were amazed. They had expected to have trouble finding enough volunteers. Instead, they had to turn people away. General Susan Moore was reviewing the volunteer applications when she noticed something strange. These people aren't just volunteers. They're already thinking like soldiers. Her aide, Colonel Paul Davis, looked at the applications. "What do you mean?" "Look at their suggestions for tactics. This farmer wants to use his harvesting equipment as mobile cover. This teacher has designed a communication system using school networks. This artist has created camouflage patterns that would fool any sensor system." "They're innovating," Paul said. "They're hunting," Susan corrected. "And they're very good at it." The Vex Admiral Thrax was beginning to worry. His spy drones had been watching human space for 3 days, and what they saw made no sense. The humans weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They were preparing. "Admiral," his aide reported, "the humans are converting their civilian ships into military vessels. They're doing it very quickly." "How quickly?" "Faster than any species we've ever encountered. They're turning cargo ships into battleships in a matter of hours." Admiral Thrax studied the reports. "This is impossible. They've been at peace for 3,000 years. They should have forgotten how to fight." "Perhaps they have forgotten, sir. Perhaps this is just desperation." But Admiral Thrax had been a warrior for his entire life. He knew the difference between desperation and preparation, and what he was seeing from the humans looked very much like preparation. "Send more spy drones," he ordered. "I want to know everything about these humans." The spy drones sent back more disturbing reports. Human children were playing war games in the streets. Human adults were practicing with weapons they had never seen before, but somehow seemed to understand. Human scientists were designing new weapons faster than the Vex computers could analyze them. And everywhere, the humans were smiling. "They're enjoying this," Admiral Thrax's aide said in disbelief. Admiral Thrax was beginning to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't acting like any species he had ever conquered. They were acting like something else entirely. They were acting like predators who had just found worthy prey. 4 days remained until the deadline, and humanity was no longer sleeping. The first shots of the war were fired on a Tuesday morning Earth time. The Vex had sent a small fleet ahead of their main force, expecting to find easy targets. Instead, they found Commander Rick Davis and his squadron of converted cargo ships. Rick had been a freight pilot for 20 years. He knew his ship, the Iron Eagle, better than he knew his own apartment. When the war started, he had volunteered immediately, not because he was brave, but because he was curious. He wanted to see what his ship could do in a real fight. "Enemy ships detected," his weapons officer called out. Lieutenant Sarah Walsh had been a mining engineer before the war. Now she was operating weapon systems that had been mining lasers. Just days before. "How many?" Rick asked. 12 large cruisers, sir. They're moving in formation, just like the tactical manuals said they would." Rick grinned. He had read those manuals too, along with thousands of other humans who had suddenly become very interested in military history. "Sarah, what do the manuals say about fighting against superior numbers?" "Don't fight fair, sir." "Exactly. Send a message to the other ships. Tell them we're going to do something the Vex won't expect." The Iron Eagle and her sister ships didn't attack the Vex fleet directly. Instead, they scattered in different directions, forcing the enemy to split up to chase them. But the human ships weren't running away. They were setting up an ambush. Rick's ship hid behind a small asteroid, waiting. When the first Vex cruiser came around the rock, Sarah was ready. The mining laser that had once cut through solid rock now cut through the enemy ship's hull like paper. "Target destroyed," Sarah reported. But she didn't sound happy about killing. She sounded excited about solving a problem. The other human ships used similar tactics. Captain Mary Johnson used her cargo hauler to ram a Vex ship, ejecting in an escape pod at the last second. The Vex had never seen anyone sacrifice their ship as a weapon before Captain Steve Miller turned his communication array into a weapon, sending signals that confused the Vex targeting systems. The enemy ships began shooting at each other by mistake. Within an hour, the Vex advance fleet was destroyed. Not a single human ship was lost. Admiral Thrax received the battle report with growing alarm. How did they do this? They didn't fight. Like soldiers, sir, his aide reported. They fought like hunters. Each ship used different tactics. They improvised. They adapted. 12 of our best ships against 8 converted cargo vessels. How is this possible? The humans seem to think of their ships as tools, not weapons. They use them in ways we never considered. Admiral Thrax studied the battle recordings. The humans had fought without formation, without standard tactics, without any of the military discipline that the Vex understood. And they had won. Send word to the main fleet, he ordered. Tell them the humans are more dangerous than we thought. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread quickly. But instead of celebration, there was something else. The humans were getting more confident. The grin that had started when they first heard about the Vex was spreading. Dr. Amy Foster was studying the psychological changes in the human population. They're not just confident, she told the Defense Council. They're becoming something different, something we haven't seen in thousands of years. What do you mean? Asked Council Leader Margaret Foster. They're remembering what they used to be. Before we learned to live in peace, humans were the most successful predators on Earth. We didn't just survive, we thrived. We took over the entire planet. She showed them brain scans from volunteers who had signed up for military service. Look at these patterns. The parts of the brain that control hunting behavior, strategic thinking, and pack coordination are all becoming more active. Is that dangerous? Margaret asked. Not dangerous. Effective. These people are becoming the most efficient fighting force in human history. They have all the knowledge and technology of our civilization, plus the instincts of our ancestors. General Susan Moore was seeing the same thing in her training camps. Humans who had never held weapons before were learning to fight with incredible speed. More importantly, they were learning to think like warriors. They're not just following orders, she told her officers. They're improving on them. Every day, they come up with new tactics, new strategies, new ways to win. Colonel Paul Davis nodded. Yesterday, a group of volunteers figured out how to turn a food processor into a weapon. Today, they're working on turning the entire food distribution system into a military network. Everything is becoming a weapon, Susan said. Not because we're violent, but because we're creative. We see potential in everything. The civilian population was changing too. Factories that had made toys were now making equipment for soldiers. Schools were teaching children how to recognize enemy ships. Artists were designing camouflage that could fool alien sensors. And everywhere, people were volunteering. Not just for military service, but for everything. They wanted to help. They wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. Captain Jake Morrison was still in space, now commanding a small fleet of human ships. They had been joined by more volunteers every day, pilots and engineers and scientists who wanted to be part of the fight. Captain, we're getting reports from the outer colonies, Lieutenant Ben Clark said. The farming worlds are converting their equipment. The mining stations are preparing to fight. Everyone wants to help. Jake nodded. What about the Vex? Are they still coming? Yes, sir. Their main fleet is still 3 days away, but they're moving more slowly now. They seem to be cautious. Dr. Lisa Chong looked up from her sensor readings. Jake, I'm detecting something interesting. The Vex ships are sending out more scout drones. They're trying to understand what happened to their advance fleet. What are they finding? Nothing that makes sense to them. We don't fight like any species they've encountered before. We're not following their rules. Jake smiled. That's because we're not playing their game. We're playing ours. The Vex main fleet was indeed moving more slowly. Admiral Thrax had ordered his ships to proceed with caution after the loss of the advance fleet. He was studying every report, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The humans are converting their entire civilization into a military force, his intelligence officer reported. But they're not doing it like any species we've seen before. What do you mean? They're not building armies, sir. They're building something else. Every human seems to be becoming a warrior, but they're all different kinds of warriors. Some are fighting with ships. Some are fighting with information. Some are fighting with ideas. Admiral Thrax had conquered 47 civilizations, but he had never seen anything like this. Usually, when he threatened a species, they either surrendered immediately or built traditional military forces. The humans were doing neither. They're turning their entire society into a weapon, he said finally. Yes, sir, but not a weapon like any we understand. It's like they're becoming a single giant predator. The Admiral studied the star charts. In 2 days, his fleet would reach human space. He had 1,000 ships, the largest fleet the Vex had ever assembled. But for the first time in his career, he wasn't certain of victory. Send another message to the humans, he ordered. Tell them they have one more chance to surrender. The message reached Earth within hours. The Human Defense Council read it and passed it on to the population. The response was immediate and universal. Laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the laughter of people who had just heard a very funny joke. The idea that they would surrender now, after they had remembered what they were capable of, seemed ridiculous. To them, Dr. Henry Adams, the old military historian, was asked to respond to the Vex ultimatum. He looked at the camera and smiled. Admiral Thrax, he said, thank you for reminding us who we used to be. We had almost forgotten. But now we remember. And we're looking forward to showing you what 3,000 years of peace have taught us about war. The message was broadcast across human space and sent to the Vex fleet. Everywhere humans heard it, they smiled a little wider. The grin was spreading. And soon, the Vex would understand what it meant. In the factories and shipyards, in the schools and laboratories, and the homes and offices of 1,000 worlds, humanity was preparing for war. Not with fear or anger, but with the quiet confidence of a species that had just remembered, was very, very good at winning. The countdown continued. 2 days until the Vex arrived, and humanity was ready to hunt. The Vex main fleet arrived at the edge of human space like a storm of metal and fire. Admiral Thrax had brought 1,000 ships, enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. He expected the humans to hide behind their planets, waiting for the inevitable. Instead, the humans came out to meet them. Captain Jake Morrison led the first wave of human ships. His fleet had grown to over 200 vessels, all of them converted civilian ships with volunteer crews. They should have been no match for the Vex war fleet. Admiral Thrax, Jake said over the communication channel, welcome to human space. We've been waiting for you. You should have used that time to prepare your surrender, the Vex Admiral replied. Now you will all die. Maybe, Jake said, but you won't enjoy it. A battle began with the Vex doing what they always did. They formed perfect battle lines and advanced in formation, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns. It was military doctrine that had worked for them for centuries. The humans did something completely different. They scattered like a flock of birds, each ship going in a different direction. But they weren't running. They were hunting. Captain Mary Johnson took her cargo hauler the Lucky Strike and dove straight toward the biggest Vex ship. Her hold was full of mining explosives, and she was grinning like a child on her birthday. "Mary, what are you doing?" Jake called over the radio. "Something fun," she replied, and rammed her ship into the Vex flagship's weapon array. The explosion took out half the enemy ship's guns and sent Mary's escape pod spinning away. Its pilot laughing with joy. Commander Rick Davis was using his ship like a fighter pilot, dodging between the massive Vex cruisers and hitting their weak points with his converted mining laser. He had studied the battle recordings from the first fight and knew exactly where to aim. "These ships are built for fighting other ships their size," he called out to his squadron. "They can't track targets that move like fighters." Captain Steve Miller had turned his communication ship into something the Vex had never seen before. He was jamming their signals, feeding them false information, and making their own ship's computers think they were under attack by allies. "Their tactical network is completely confused," Steve reported. "Half of them are shooting at each other. But the most dangerous human ship wasn't fighting at all." Lieutenant Ben Clark, the young officer who had started the war as a communications specialist, was running silent at the edge of the battle. His ship was full of sensors, recording everything the Vex did. "I'm learning their patterns," he reported. To Jake, "Every time they fire, every time they move, every time they think, I'm figuring out how they work." "What have you learned?" "They're not creative. They do the same things over and over. They're like a machine. But humans... Ben paused. As he watched Mary Johnson's escape pod get picked up by a rescue ship. "Humans are like water. We find a way around everything." The battle raged for hours. The Vex had superior numbers and firepower, but the humans had something else. They had the ability to adapt, to improvise, to find new ways to win. Every time the Vex figured out a human tactic, the humans changed tactics. Every time the Vex tried to trap a human ship, the humans turned the trap into a weapon. Every time the Vex thought they understood what the humans were doing, the humans did something completely different. Admiral Thrax watched the battle with growing alarm. He was losing ships, not to superior technology or numbers, but to sheer unpredictability. The humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. "They're not following any military doctrine," his tactical officer reported. "They're just improvising. How can they coordinate without orders? They seem to understand each other without talking, like they're thinking as one mind." Admiral Thrax had never seen anything like it. The humans were fighting as individuals, but somehow they were also fighting as a single unit. It was like watching a pack of wolves, each one doing its own job, but all working toward the same goal. "Sir," his aide said urgently, "we're receiving reports from our other fleets. The humans are attacking our supply lines." "What? How?" "Human ships have appeared in our rear areas. They're hitting our fuel depots, our communication stations, our repair facilities. They're not just defending their space, they're attacking ours." Back on Earth, General Susan Moore was coordinating the larger strategy. She had sent small groups of human ships deep into Vex territory, not to fight big battles, but to cause chaos. "We're not trying to beat them in a fair fight," she explained to her officers. "We're trying to make them understand that there's no such thing as a fair fight." Captain Tony Garcia had taken his engineering ship, the Hammer, and attacked a Vex supply depot. But instead of just destroying it, he had reprogrammed the depot systems to send false information to the Vex fleet. "Now their ships think they have fuel when they don't," he reported. "And they think they have ammunition when they don't. Some of them are going to run out of both at very inconvenient times." The strategy was working. The Vex fleet was running low on supplies. Their communications were being jammed, and their commanders were getting conflicting orders from their own systems. But the humans were just getting started. Dr. Lisa Chong had been studying the Vex during the battle, and she had made an important discovery. Jake, I know how they think. What do you mean? They're hierarchical. Everything depends on orders from the top. If we can confuse their command structure, we can paralyze their entire fleet. How do we do that? We make them think their own admiral is giving them contradictory orders. Lieutenant Ben Clark, who had become the fleet's expert on Vex communications, smiled. I can do that. Give me 10 minutes. Within minutes, Vex ships across the fleet were receiving orders that made no sense. Some were told to attack their own allies. Others were told to retreat in opposite directions. Some were told to surrender. To ships that didn't exist, the Vex fleet began to fall apart. Ships scattered in confusion. Some stopped fighting entirely. Others began shooting at each other, trying to follow orders they didn't understand. Admiral Thrax realized what was happening. The humans are inside our communication system. They're making us fight ourselves. How is that possible? Because they think differently than we do. They don't just fight with weapons. They fight with ideas. The Admiral made a decision that no Vex commander had ever made before. He ordered his fleet to retreat, but the humans weren't done with them yet. As the Vex ships tried to withdraw, they found their escape routes blocked by human ships that had been waiting for them. The humans had predicted the retreat and prepared for it. You can't leave yet, Jake Morrison said over the communication channel. We're just getting started. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a hunt. The humans pursued the fleeing Vex ships, not to destroy them all, but to teach them a lesson. They disabled engines, destroyed weapons, and captured crew members. They wanted the Vex to survive so they could tell others what they had learned. By the end of the day, the mighty Vex fleet was scattered and broken. Half their ships were destroyed or captured. The other half were limping away, carrying news of their defeat. Admiral Thrax found himself alone on his flagship, most of his crew either dead or captured. He was surrounded by human ships, but they weren't attacking. They were just watching. Admiral, Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication system. We need to talk. I will not surrender, Admiral Thrax said. I'm not asking you to surrender. I'm asking you to learn. The Vex Admiral was confused. Learn what? Learn why you lost. Learn what you're really fighting. Learn what humans are capable of when they remember who they used to be. Jake's ship moved closer. You've conquered 47 civilizations, but you've never conquered a species that conquered itself first. You've never fought a species that learned to be peaceful by becoming too dangerous to fight. Admiral Thrax was silent for a long moment. What do you want? We want you to go home. We want you to tell your people what you learned here. We want you to spread the word that humans are not prey. And if I refuse? Jake's voice was calm but firm. Then we'll make sure the message gets delivered anyway. Your choice, Admiral. The Vex Admiral looked at his ruined fleet, at the human ships that had defeated them so easily, at the species that had turned 3,000 years of peace into the most effective military force he had ever seen. I will deliver your message, he said finally. Good. And Admiral? The next time you're thinking about conquering someone, remember this day. Remember what happens when you wake up a sleeping predator. The surviving Vex ships limped away from human space, carrying news of their defeat. The word would spread quickly through the galaxy. Humanity was no longer the peaceful species that everyone thought they knew. They were something much more dangerous. They were humans who remembered how to hunt, and the hunt was just beginning. Admiral Thrax's flagship limped through space, its engines damaged and its crew demoralized. The once mighty Vex fleet was scattered across dozens of star systems, the survivors telling the same impossible story. They had been defeated by a species that had forgotten how to fight, but the humans hadn't forgotten. They